An Israeli missile strike kills dozens taking refuge in a southern Gaza tent camp.
Death surrounds us in every place, and we don't know where to go. Where are we to go? Where are the Arab countries to stand with us? We are dying slowly.
Plus, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris come face-to-face tonight.
This toe-to-toe contest, where both will vie for points from a deeply split electorate, could be decisive. They bring very different styles to this stage.
Ukraine continues taking the fight onto Russian soil, and how exiled journalists are working to amplify the silenced voices of women and others in Afghanistan.
Today is Tuesday, September 10th, and this is VOA's Flashpoint.
Good evening, I'm Steve Karish with Lori London. Rescuers in Gaza continue to search for casualties early Tuesday after Israeli missiles struck a tent camp in southern Gaza. Local authorities say dozens were killed and injured in the strikes, which caused a massive crater in the camp. Residents and medics said the refugee encampment near Khan Yunis in the Al-Mawasi area, which Israel had designated as a humanitarian safe zone for displaced Palestinians, was struck by at least 4 missiles. The camp is crowded with families, like the family of Ebitsam al-Rai, who fled there from other parts of Gaza.
We are moved from place to place. We don't know where to go. There is no safety in any place. Every time we move to a place, we still find fear and horror. We feel like we're not living. We are dying slowly. And as you can see, these are our belongings. Can you see? All is destroyed. We were displaced from Khan Yunis to Rafah, from Rafah to Al-Mawasi. We don't know where to go. Wherever we go, we find there is no safety.
Charred tents, scattered clothes, and belongings of the displaced were scattered everywhere. At least 20 tents caught fire, the Gaza Civil Emergency Service announced.
Death surrounds us in every place, and we don't know where to go. Where are we to go? Where are the Arab countries to stand with us? We are dying slowly. Israelis kill us and finish us off. We are not living. This is not a life. We are tired and fed up.
The Israeli military said it struck significant Hamas terrorists who were operating a command and control center embedded inside the humanitarian area.
Following the recent death of 6 of the hostages taken on October 7th, nearly 750,000 people were protesting in the streets in Israel this past weekend. Protesters have been demanding that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accept a deal for a ceasefire in Gaza that would bring the remaining hostages home. President Joe Biden has said that Netanyahu is not doing enough. Much of the Israeli public thinks Netanyahu isn't doing enough. But what does Netanyahu think? Does he not agree with his countrymen that a swift end to the fighting and the hostages' safe return is in Israel's best interest? For some insights, Steve spoke with Harley Lipman. He's a member of the executive committee of the American Israel Public Affairs Committee and the Dean's Advisory Board at Columbia University's Graduate School of International and Public Affairs.
You've spoken with Benjamin Netanyahu. You've also spoken with the families of the hostages. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
And the families of the hostages are pressuring Netanyahu to sign a deal, to get a ceasefire, to bring the hostages home. That's something that Netanyahu is hearing from the hundreds of thousands of protesters in Israel and more around the world, even from other governments. President Biden said that Netanyahu is not doing enough. Why isn't Netanyahu listening to what he's being told by all these people?
Well, it's a great question. And I think that what he would say is that his priority is to bring home the hostages, but it's also to end the war with Hamas. Keep in mind, and this is where context is everything, Israel gave 1,000 Palestinian prisoners in exchange for 1 Israeli soldier. Gilad Shalit was the name of the Israeli soldier. And it was very controversial at the time And the feeling was nobody's ever left behind. It's a huge morale booster for the Israeli army or for any army that your country will do anything to get you back. But many years later, look at the consequences of that. Of those 1,000 Palestinians that were let go, and all of them convicted of terrorism of one form or another, many of murder, they've gone back to murder. So when you examine it and realize that many of those people participated in the October 7th massacre and rape of innocent Israelis, this has made Netanyahu reevaluate what's happening. You have to be very careful about the day after or the consequences. Great question. And I asked them that question myself. And they were divided. I'd say most of them, for understandable reasons, it's their families, disagree with Bibi Netanyahu and feel not enough is being done. And they're very angry and they feel very betrayed. And in fairness to them, their big issue is, above all, this was on Bibi Netanyahu's watch. So this is their criticism of Netanyahu, which speaks to accountability. There are some of I spoke to many of the hostage families and brought over many to the United States. And there are some who say, you think I don't love my son who's being held in Gaza? But I know if we give in, the next time they'll take 1,000 Israelis instead of just 200 or whatever the number is they eventually took. They'll say, I'm thinking of the future of the country. I don't want to be selfish. I'm thinking of my children, and I'm thinking of other Israelis in the future, where if you give in to this, you're only rewarding it. And by rewarding it, you're telling them this works. And why wouldn't they do it again, since it's been highly successful? So the people are torn. But, a lot of people feel, even if you're not critical of Bibi Netanyahu, I think the biggest challenge he has is, under his watch, how could he explain that they allowed Hamas to build these tunnels, and then when they did, to successfully breach Israel's security, and then Israel was very slow in responding. These are very legitimate issues that, there'll be many investigations and books and movies written about it, but this is a very valid issue that Bibi Netanyahu will be held accountable for one way or another.
Harley Lipman, a member of the Executive Committee of the American Israel Public Affairs Committee and the Dean's Advisory Board at Columbia University's Graduate School of International and Public Affairs.
The other top story of the day concerns American politics. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump square off Tuesday night in Philadelphia for their first presidential debate. Analysts say this could be a decisive moment as they vie for the presidency. VOA's Anita Powell reports from the White House.
In the Republican corner, former President Donald Trump, trying to reclaim the title after a 4-year break. And in the Democrat corner, Vice President Kamala Harris, the rising challenger who has Americans wondering whether she can go the distance all the way to the Oval Office. Tuesday evening's presidential debate, with its glossy production values, pre-event taunts, and starkly different contenders, feels like a heavyweight bout. Trump's last debate ended with a knockout. Just weeks after President Joe Biden's lackluster late June debate performance against Trump, Biden announced he would not seek re-election. Now, with Harris just weeks into running as his replacement, she faces Trump on the debate stage. But analysts say it's more than a spectacle. This toe-to-toe contest, where both will vie for points from a deeply split electorate, could be decisive. They bring very different styles to this stage. Trump has jabbed at Harris's intelligence and predicts that his odds against her are better than against his last debate opponent, Biden.
He is a smarter person than she is. Oh, they're waiting for the debate.
And here's Harris taking a short break from debate training.
Look, it's time to turn the page on the divisiveness. It's time to bring our country together, chart a new way forward.
June's Trump-Biden debate drew more than 51 million U.S. television viewers. Analysts expect big numbers for this matchup, too, and high stakes for both contenders. Nate French teaches communications at Wake Forest University.
Trump has to prove that he can be president. And he has to prove to a lot of the people who are looking at him that he can be as assertive and as aggressive as he wants to be without being rude, if he's going to try to get anybody that might not be currently on the Trump train. Kamala Harris has to prove that she's presidential. She has to prove that she can attack and she can pull back. She has to prove that she can identify where her policies are different than Biden, but still moving in the same Democratic platform.
Moderators will pepper the candidates with questions on major issues like the economy, reproductive rights, foreign policy, and more. Each candidate, given only a pen, paper, and water, has 2 minutes to reply. It all happens here in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, on Tuesday night. Anita Powell, VOA News, the White House.
Turning to the war in Europe, Ukraine continues to turn the tables by taking the fight directly onto Russian soil. From Reuters, Fiona Jones has the story.
Ukraine on Tuesday launched its biggest drone attack to date on Moscow. The 144 drone bombardment killed at least one woman near the capital, Russian authorities said, and wrecked dozens of homes. Russia said it downed at least 20 of Ukraine's drones as they swarmed over the Moscow region, which has a population of over 21 million. Footage from the city's Ramenskoye district showed fires breaking out in homes after drones damaged high-rise apartment buildings. And according to Moscow's regional governor, it was in this district that a woman was killed and 3 people were injured. Yulia Rodionova is a resident in the area. Her windows were shattered and a fragment of a drone was left on her balcony.
A man was taken out from house number 21. He had his side burnt and a fragment wound. They also carried out another man, a very elderly one, and quickly got out a woman. That's all I saw. I don't know anymore.
Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that the strike on Moscow shows the, quote, Kyiv regime is Russia's enemy and Russia needs to keep fighting. Kyiv said Russia, which sent tens of thousands of troops into Ukraine in February 2022, had attacked it overnight with 46 drones, 38 of which were destroyed. As Russia advances in eastern Ukraine, Kyiv has taken the war to Russia. It has executed a cross-border attack in Russia's western Kursk region, which began early last month. And it has been carrying out increasingly large drone attacks deep into Russian territory.
That was Fiona Jones with Reuters.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in London for meetings with top UK officials, including his counterpart, Foreign Secretary David Lammy. The two announced that they will be visiting Ukraine on Wednesday.
This joint trip reflects strong transatlantic support, aligned also with our NATO allies, with our Indo-Pacific partners, with the more than 50 countries that continue to strongly and resolutely support Ukraine.
Blinken said the U.S. and other allies are also preparing to impose further sanctions on Iran for supplying short-range ballistic missiles to Russia for its war in Ukraine. Iran has denied supplying missiles to Russia.
You're listening to Flashpoint from the Voice of America. I'm Lori London, along with Steve Karish in Washington. Talk of an arms embargo for Sudan. That's coming up in a few minutes.
Now in South America, as the international community closely follows fallout from the disputed Venezuelan election, the United States is calling for transparency and weighing actions against the government of President Nicolas Maduro, which has issued arrest warrants against opposition leaders, including rival presidential candidate Edmundo Gonzalez, who fled to Spain. Celia Mendoza reports from the State Department in Washington.
The United States is evaluating measures against the government of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro after opposition candidate Edmundo Gonzalez was forced to seek political asylum in Spain. According to data gathered by local observers and released by the opposition, Gonzalez received the most votes in the July 28 presidential election. A State Department Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel.
Nothing is off the table, and in close coordination with our partners, including those that we engage with regularly on this, we're considering a range of options to demonstrate to Maduro and his representatives that their misgovernments, their crackdown on human rights, their disregard for democracy and free and fair elections has real and legitimate consequences.
The exit of the 75-year-old Gonzalez was coordinated between the governments of Spain and Venezuela, according to Venezuela's Attorney General Tarek Saab. The Biden administration has imposed sanctions against companies and members of the government in Venezuela, and the U.S. and others have used these measures as leverage to broker agreements, such as last fall's Barbados deal, which outlined conditions for a competitive election in Venezuela. However, opposition leader Maria Corina Machado, who was banned from participating in the election, says the U.S. has not done enough.
I certainly think the United States should do much more. And I've been very clear to them and to other countries. I think that perpetrators of human rights violations and crimes against humanity should know that they will be held account.
The White House on Monday intensified its calls for transparency and the release of the voting data. John Kirby, White House National Security spokesperson.
What needs to happen next is Mr. Maduro needs to heed the call of the international community and, quite frankly, the Venezuelan people and release the data so that the whole world can see what the Venezuelan people, who they voted for, and that their democratic aspirations are met.
Maduro has dismissed Gonzalez's claims of victory, alleging there was a right-wing plot to sabotage his government. The opposition, meanwhile, has mobilized the Venezuelan diaspora to protest in cities worldwide in dispute of the election results. Celia Mendoza, VOA News, the State Department.
The United Nations Security Council is expected to vote Wednesday on whether to renew existing sanctions that prevent the transfer of military equipment to Sudan's western Darfur region. Mohammed Youssef reports the pending vote comes as Human Rights Watch calls on the Council to expand an existing arms embargo currently on the restive region to the rest of the country. In this story, narrated by Steve Miller.
The western Darfur region has been the epicenter of Sudan's current civil war, which pits the Sudanese Armed Forces, or SAF, the Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, and other militias against each other. UN agencies and rights groups say the parties involved have committed war crimes and other human rights violations during the conflict, which has lasted nearly 18 months. Ahead of Wednesday's vote, Human Rights Watch is urging the Council to consider imposing an arms ban on the entire country to stop the ongoing rights violation and the suffering of the people. The Sudanese government opposes expansion of the embargo. Human Rights Watch investigators found that some of the weapons being used in the conflict were acquired after the civil war broke out in April of last year. Jean-Baptiste Golopa is a senior researcher in Human Rights Watch's Crisis, Conflict, and Arms Division.
We based our research on an analysis of photos and videos posted on social media and primarily taken by the fighters themselves.
The rights group's report shows some of the mortars fired were manufactured in China last year. Companies in Iran, Russia, Serbia, and the United Arab Emirates have also produced some of the weapons used, according to the organization. In 2004, a year after the start of another Darfur conflict between ethnic militias and government-backed militias known as the Janjaweed, the UN imposed the arms embargo on Darfur. The embargo originally applied to non-governmental entities and was later extended to all parties in the conflict, including the Sudanese government. Ahmed Hashi is a Horn of Africa political and security commentator. He says the regional and international community is doing little to end the conflict, and says that, in fact, RSF leader Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, better known as Hamidi, is receiving strong foreign support.
I think the United Arab Emirates and other proxy states are arming Mr. Hemeti. I think that the rebellion inside Sudan is foreign-led. I think that the people who caused the Janjaweed and caused international, human rights international crime are fighting in Sudan. I'm afraid that terrorism will rear its ugly head, and we are all, including me, ashamed as Africans that we have not done anything.
The UAE has denied arming the RSF. Galopa says imposing an arms ban in one region would not solve the conflict. He says a ban is needed nationwide.
We believe that the existing embargo is not sufficient, that there needs to be a wholesale embargo on the sale of armed and military equipment to the whole of Sudan. We and others documented very serious abuses carried out by the warring parties since last year, including widespread war crimes, crimes against humanity. We published a report on Darfur showing that ethnic cleansing was committed. And so we think it's urgent for the Security Council to broaden that arms embargo.
The group is also calling on the Security Council to condemn governments that are violating the existing arms embargo on Darfur and take urgent measures to sanction individuals and entities that are also doing so. For Mohammed Yusuf, I'm Steve Miller, VOA News.
A follow-up to a story we recently reported. The man accused of killing Ugandan Olympic runner Rebecca Cheptegei by pouring gasoline on her and setting her on fire has died himself. He succumbed to burns he sustained during the attack.
Taliban laws and restrictions make journalism in Afghanistan increasingly challenging. But media in exile are ensuring that voices of women and others are still being amplified. For Mohammed Qasim Mandokil in London, Bejan Hamdard has the story for VOA.
From Kabul to London. When the Taliban seized power, Afghan journalist Zahra Joya moved her entire media outlet, Roxana Media, overseas. But she says its mission remains the same.
We're also giving a platform for Afghan women to write their own stories. So they're gonna write their perspectives, their experience life in Afghanistan, and talking about their dreams.
The plight of Afghan women is embedded in Roxana Media. Even its name is taken from a young woman killed in 2015 for leaving an arranged marriage. But since the Taliban's return, women are under ever more harsh conditions. They can no longer get an education beyond primary school, and they cannot easily work, travel without a close male relative, or even visit parks and gyms.
Our colleagues inside Afghanistan are trying to report the realities of what is happening to the women and people of Afghanistan.
The Taliban have tightened restrictions on women in the past 3 years and on journalists. A new law bars women from singing, reciting poetry, or even speaking aloud in public. And it bans the publication of images of living beings, leaving many media confused about what they will or will not be able to show. Hamed Obaidi taught journalism at Kabul University until he fled in August 2021. He founded an aid group for exiled media called the Afghanistan Journalist Support Organization. He says exiled media play an important role.
I think there's a potential for collaboration between the newly established Afghan exiled media and the international media. On the one hand, it will help them financially as they can sell content, and on the other hand, it will help with covering issues in Afghanistan in the international media.
Joya says working with international media has helped her team amplify their stories.
We worked with at least 3 prestigious international media organizations. One of them is The Guardian, published in Britain. We also worked with Time magazine and the Fuller Project, which is for women. These successes are all the result of the hard work of our colleagues in Afghanistan.
With media rights in Afghanistan in steep decline, Joya says international support and encouragement is crucial for exiled media. For Mohammed Qasim Mandokhil in London, Bejan Hamdard, VOA News.
And that's going to wrap up today's show. There's more VOA coverage 24 hours a day on our website, voanews.com, and across our social media platforms. On behalf of everyone here at VOA, thanks for listening. Until tomorrow, I'm Steve Karish with Lori London.
For deeper dives and expert analysis, listen to VOA Podcasts. Issues in the News explores the biggest stories every weekend, while International Edition keeps you informed every weekday. Plus, with the 5-minute newscast at the top of every hour, you're always up to date.